That's pretty much how it works. Let's run and see if it is actually working. So we save this. Then we go to main and we can test it, right? So just run main and voila. Let's see. So you can see here that it works. So short and sweet how you can connect Google Analytics with Google Sheets using the API and app script. So I have this flowchart that I'm gonna use to explain how we're going to set up the project. So basically, first we need to set up a config variable in AMP script. I will explain that, but basically this config will have the property ID of the project of Google Analytics. Then we will be able to manage what will be the start and the end of the report that we want to run. Then the sheet name. Then we will have the client ID, the client secret, and the refresh token that you get in from Google Cloud. And then once we have the all these variables, we will be able to run a report and connect to the API. So basically we will have, this will be like the main function, right? And from this main function, we will do a couple of things. So the first one is that we're gonna refresh, we're gonna get an access token using the refresh token that we got here. Then we will have another section, which is the fetching, right? In this case, we will have a helper that will just, receive something, some variables. In this case, the way it works with Google Analytics is that you pass dimensions and metrics, and with that, you can run a report. I will explain that once we get to the function. But pretty much that will be the helper that we will have, and then we will call it 3 times. Once to get the totals, like the metadata from Google Analytics. So to show you what I mean, this is my Google Analytics that I have for my website. So you can see that I have some things here. So what we will get is, like, when I say metadata, this is what I want. What I mean, like getting the active users, the new users, the average engagement, and the events account. That will be the fetch total part. Then we will run it again, but this time we want to get the active users by city. So to show you here, it is this one here, right? So I will bring this, and then we will run it one last time, and this time we're gonna do the same, get the active users, but by country. In this case, will be this one here. Just this is just to show you how it will work, right? But you can pull whatever you want from Google Analytics, right? Everything works the same. I will explain that once we get into the coding part, but yeah, I just wanna bring city, country, and the metadata to show you how it works. And once we have the data, we want to write to a sheet, right? So in this case, we'll have another function that want to receive that, and it's going to write the meta, totals, and city to the sheet. So that's pretty much what we're going to do. So first, we need to set up the config and get all these variables, right? So let's do that. First, we need to create a spreadsheet, right? So let me create one so you can see that I'm doing everything from scratch. So this is the spreadsheet. And as you can see, I don't have anything. So I will go to extensions, app script, and here we need to set up the project. So you can give it a name if you want. And then here we have the files, right? So let's quickly set up what will we need. So as always, I always set up this as main, and here we will have like the config and the main function. And then here we will have like fetchers. And then here we will have another one that is gonna be like helpers. So just to keep everything organized in case you wanna like keep adding things and scaling the project, it gets easier, right? So in main, as I mentioned, we need to set up the config. Okay, so this is the config, and here you can see the variables that we need to get. So as I explained before, we need to get the property ID, dates, set up the sheet name, client ID, client secret, and refresh token, and that's the variables that you can see here. So the first one, the property ID, how to get that. So if when you go to Google Analytics, here in Google Analytics, you go to admin, and then you go here to property, and then property details. And here you can see the ID of the property, right? So you just copy that, you go back to a sheet, and then you paste that, right? So you just paste it here. Then the date start. This is just like the range of dates that you wanna run the report with. In this case, I'm just gonna run September, and then you can just change that, depending on the dates that you wanna run. The sheet name is gonna use this GA4 and my name. I mean, this is arbitrary. You can also change it, right? And then these are like the most difficult part to get here. So we need to get the client ID, the client secret, and the refresh token for Google Analytics, right? So the way you do it is that you go to Google Cloud. So once you are here in Google Cloud, we need to create a project. Make sure you are under the account where Google Analytics is. So you are here, select a project, just create a project, call it like YouTube demo. And you select a billing account, you have some tests here, and then you can create. And once you have that, you wait a little bit, and then once it's created, you select the project here. So you can see it, right? This is the project that we just created. Now, you go here to Analytics API, Google Analytics API, this one here, and then you just enable that. Okay, so once that's enabled, you go here to create credentials, and then here you go to you click application data, next. Here you give it a name. I will give it the same name that I will use throughout the demo, which is YouTube demo. You just copy that to have it handy, and then you just create a continue, select a role. You can just select as owner, continue, and then that's it, done. Okay, so once you finish that, now you go here to OAuth consent screen, and you need to create that. So you get started, and here you get a name again, and then you can select your own email, and then here you select external, next, and here you input an email again. Let's use the one I always use for these demos, and then finished, right? Okay, so now that's created, you need to create the auth client. So you just click here, and then you select application type, web application. You give it a name, same name that I'm using always. And here you need to set up the authorized redirect URIs. We need to set up one, but like I like using this one. This is the Google Developers one. You can see developers.google.com. And here this is pretty handy. It's a tool from Google that help us to get the refresh token easily. So just copy that URL. I will put it in the description so you can use it, but you pretty much you just click here at URL, create, right? And as you can see, you got the client ID and the client secret. So copy that and put it in the spreadsheet. Okay, so you can see here that I put that in the spreadsheet. So here in the code, so I added a client ID and the client secret, and the only thing missing is the refresh token. So how to get this refresh token? So here we are back in Google Cloud. So you click just OK, but before we do the flow to get the refresh token, go here to audience and publish the app, okay? That will be helpful because if you don't publish the app, you will get a refresh token that has an expiry date, and you don't want that. You don't want to be doing this process every time. So to get a permanent one, you need to publish the app. That's pretty handy. You just publish the app before starting the flow. You can see in production, and then here when you are back to Google Developers, here we need to select the API that we want to authorize to get the refresh token. So the one for Google Analytics is called this one here, Google Analytics API. So you just choose this one, and you can choose read only or analytics, or depending on if you wanna whatever you wanna do. Maybe you wanna write to a report, so do some manage data. So in that case, you need edit, right? But if you wanna get like general everything, you select the first one. And then here you go to this little gear, and then you click here and use your own auth credentials, right? And here you just paste again what we just got, like the client ID and the client secret. So let's do that. So as you can see, I added the client ID and secret, but before we start the flow, I wanted to mention that here when I said that you needed to redirect URIs in clients, remove the last slash that you get, right? In that, because otherwise it won't work. So just make it like this without the end slash, and you just click save. And then if you start the flow, it will work. So you click here on authorize APIs. So you will get this pop-up where you can just authorize the app. Just follow the flow, the usual flow. And that's it. Now you go here to exchange authorization code for tokens. You click there and you can see that you got the refresh token. Simple as that. So you copy that and you can see that it doesn't have an expires in. This expires in is for the access token, but it is not for the refresh token. And here is the spreadsheet, you just paste it, and that's it. That's the refresh token. Okay, so with that, we already have the config, and that's pretty much everything that we need. So now let's start building this. So the next step is let's have the main, so you can see like overall how the whole structure is. So let's put here the main, and this is the main. So you can see I added as always some comments and steps within the function, so you can see what it's doing. Like make me the let's make this bigger so you can see. Like this. Yeah, I think like that's fine. All right, so you can see here the main, right? So the first part is getting the access token using the refresh token. So pretty much, I don't if you're not familiar how these tokens work, pretty much you get like a refresh token, which is like a token that doesn't expire. You can use that token to get another token called access token, and this access token has an expiry period. So you can see here when we were getting the refresh token, you can see that this one has an expire scene, right? So once this passes, this token is not valid. So we need to use again the refresh token to get a new access token, and so on and so forth. So basically, the idea is that you make a call, you get an access token, and then you use that access token to do whatever. And then next time that you run the app again, you get a new access token, and so on and so forth. So you always are using new tokens. So that's what we're gonna do, right? So then we will have a fetcher, right? But that will be helpers. And in this one, we will do three calls, right? Once to get the metadata, once to get this report by city, and this other to get the report by country. So you can see that we're pretty much using the same function over and over again 3 times. But in the first start, you're getting the totals. The second time, we're passing this. We need the city and active users, and in the third part, we're getting country and active users. And once we have this data, we're preparing the spreadsheet, right? So in this case, we're just making sure that the sheet actually exists before we write something. And if the sheet exists, we write. Otherwise, if the sheet exists, we clear it and then we write. And if it doesn't exist, when we create a sheet. And then we just call the function, this last function, to write whatever we got from the API, right? Okay, so now let's do helpers. I think starting with helpers will be helpful. So in helpers, we just need two helpers. One is to get the token, and the other one is to write to a spreadsheet. They're gonna help us. And the fetcher, of course, we need the fetcher. So the first one, as I mentioned, is get the access token with the refresh token, and pretty simple. The first part is just making the call to the endpoint. This is the endpoint to get the access token. And in there, we are passing the client ID, the client secret, and the refresh token. And the grant type is going to be refresh token, right? And then we make the call using the URL fetch app. And then here, this is just a guard in case something happens, doesn't break. It just gives us the error. And then that's it, once we get the access token, we get the JSON, and we just filter by the access token key. And then we just return that, right? So every time that we call this function, it's gonna give us the access token. It's gonna return the string, the access token. And then let's have the other one, which is writing to a sheet. And this one, this is the one running to a sheet, right? So you can see that you received something, a sheet, the total, cities and countries, and then that's what is going to write to a spreadsheet. So here, for example, for the metadata, we're just using the dates that we set up, right, for the report. And then we're writing the active users. This is from the metadata fetch, the first part, this one. We're getting the active users, then we're getting the new users, and then here we're getting the average engagement time and the event count, right? So that would be like a table. Pretty much what it's doing here is creating like a table and then just writing that to a spreadsheet, and then it's just creating that, right? And then it's doing the same thing here. Here, just setting up the headers, city and active users, and then city data. You're just getting from the response the city and the active users per city, and then we are just getting the range in the sheet and then writing to a sheet. And we're doing pretty much the same thing here with 4 countries, right? As you can see, we're setting up the headers, and then we are getting from the response from the API, we're getting the country and active users, and then we are writing to a sheet. So that's how these two functions work. Okay, so once we have this function, write to sheet, I forgot to mention, but we also need another helper. I wanted to put it here in features, but I think it's better if it is here. And this basically is this one here, this function here, that we're gonna use for each of the in the fetching for each. So technically it's a helper, right? So here this helper, pretty much what it's doing is making the call and running and getting the report data. Here you can see that we're setting the URL. This is the URL that we always use, but the only thing, and we are passing the property ID. And then here we're using URL fetch to make the call. It's a post call, post request. And here we pass the access token and then the body that we're getting from the arguments. And then this is just to guard the response. And then once we get the response, we parse that to a JSON and we just return that. And with that, we have all the helpers. Now we can go to fetchers. And here in fetchers, we can start with the first function, right? Fetch totals. So this is the one for fetch totals. You can see that the first step that we're defining the metrics to pull. So basically we need active users, new users, user engagement duration, and event count. You can see it here in Google Analytics. Let me go back to the report. And here in the report, you can see, right, active users, new users, and ideally this is what we wanna fetch. And then with that, we build the body, and then we make the call, right, using the helper that we just created. So this is the body. Pretty much we're setting the date ranges. So this is coming from the config, and then the metrics. In this case, we only use metrics. Are gonna be these ones here. And then that's it. We call the function that we just created, the helper, passing the access token, the property ID, and the body. And it's gonna be in a JSON. And here we're just parsing, right? We're extracting the metrics from the first row, and we are just building that we want to use to write to a sheet, right? So we're building the active user, the total engagement, and for the average engagement, we don't get it directly from the API. So we are doing a quick calculation here, pretty much ourselves. And then that's it. When we have that, we just return. And remember, we are using this function to write, and it's going to receive all of them, right? So it's going to receive the first one, then the second one, then the third one, and then it's going to take all of that and write to a sheet. In this case, we are just returning what we got here in a parsed way, so it's easier to write. Okay, so now we need to build these two functions, right? Like get the active users by city and by country. But as you can see, the only thing that changes is the city of country, right? The only thing that is changing is the metric. So we could just use one function for both. The only thing that we will change is that the city of country. And you can see here in the main that we are pretty much using the same function, fetch report, but the only thing that is changing is the dimension, right? So we are changing the dimension here. So let's do that. So here is a function for that. So we are here initiating some variables. So limit pretty much is as you if you're not familiar how APIs work, pretty much you don't get like all the data at once. Once you make a call, you're gonna get like a little bit of it. You can think of it like a book. So for example, you read the first page and then you read the second page and so on and so forth. So that's how it works. Like the first call is gonna give you like an amount of data, specific amount of data, and then you move to the second page and you make the same request, but in this case you get the next set of data until you finish it. So depending on the API, they have like some limits on how many you can call per page. In this case, we are setting the limit to be 10,000. But I think this API has a huge limit, so you can make it bigger if you wanted to, if you have like a lot of data. But in this case, 10,000 sounds a good number to me. So yeah, just gonna leave it as 10,000, and then the dimensions. So you can see we are getting the dimensions that we receive here as an argument, and we are slicing them, right? So if because here I'm just passing one, right? But you could technically call multiple things here, right? You could do another one, like keep adding things, and then it's gonna be like an array of multiple, and then here you just slice them and just that's pretty much what it's doing. If you want to know more about like all the variables that you can get and all the metrics, all the dimensions and metrics, I will put this in the description here. You can see all the things that you can use, right? So for example, here these are all the ones, all the dimensions available for you to use, and then here we have metrics, right? Where is it here? Metrics. So we have all of that. That's technically you could add them all there, and that's everything that you could bring. So that's the idea. You can play with this and fetch whatever you need. And then here, this is just like once you finish the pagination, this is called pagination, right? So you get the first page, the second page, third page. Once you finish the pagination, aggregates everything here and out, and then offset pretty much is like like in the first page, let's say you are making, to make it simple, let's say this is 10, right? Like for the explanation. So the first page you're gonna get from 1 to 10. And then in the next page, you will tell the API, okay, now I already have 10. I need the second page starting from 11, right? So 11 to 20 and so on. So that's why it starts from 0, goes to 10. Next time it's gonna start from 11 until, so this will update this offset. Yeah, that's pretty much how the logic works for that. So in this case, you can see that I'm doing that here in the sixth step. You see pretty much offset starts in 0, but then the first call, we get the length of the first call, all the rows that we got. In this case, it's 10,000, so it's gonna be 10,000 that when it's updated, and in the next call offset, it's gonna be that. So yeah, this while true pretty much is doing like, if it steals more data, just keep doing the call until it finishes all the pages. So it start with this step, right? Start build one page request. So we're getting the date ranges from config, and then we're building the dimensions using this that we just set up here. Then the metrics, then we're passing the limit and the offset, and then we're making the call, right? And here we're using our helper that we had, same one that we use here, but in this case, yeah, the body is what changes. And here, then we get the response, and then here in step 4, basically what it's doing is just like a check. If the next page doesn't have any items, well, it just breaks, meaning it stops the function, stops iterating. stops looping, right? And if it is false, it just keeps going, and then here it's just mapping everything. So it's kind of building this out, right, that I mentioned. So you can see that it's doing a push, and that's when it finishes, it just returns that, right? And that's it. So now with that, we have everything that we needed here in our main, right? So the first totals is this one, then the cities and countries, this one, right? The only thing that we changed was like the dimensions, as I mentioned. And then with that, we have the data, so we just need to write it to a sheet, right? So in this case, we're just preparing the sheet. And as I mentioned in the beginning when I was explaining main, is making sure that the sheet exists. If it doesn't exist, it creates the sheet. If the sheet exists, it clears the sheet, and then it just writes, right? So when it writes, it's using this function here. As you can see, it receives the sheet, the totals that we got from the first function, from this one, and then also we're receiving cities and countries, the report for those. And then we are just parsing that here, right? That's pretty much how it works. Let's run and see if it is actually working. So we save this. Then we go to main and we can test it, right? So just run main. First time that you run this, you're gonna get a pop-up so you can run access. So you just run access. You go to advanced, select the name of the project. Here you grant access. Oh yeah, you can see here that I was explaining this, so we need to go back, try again. And voila, let's see. So you can see here that it worked. So we had, this is just for miscellaneous. We are setting up the dates or the report dates. And then this is the first function, right? This one, the metadata, you can see it here. And if we were to double check with analytics, let me open the report. So here's the report, right? And then we can double check. We have active user 202, new users 201. And then here, if we were to check active users by city, this one here, you can see that we have 34 for Asunción. And then here, if we check by country, you can see that we have 45 for the states. Yes, that's pretty much how this works. So this might be handy for someone that finds the Google add-on like too limited. Here you can, as I explained, you can pull everything from Google Analytics. You need to change the dimensions and metrics to give you like a walkthrough of what you can play with here. So if you're pulling data that is in the metadata, you could use this function, the first function that I explained. You could play with this one. But if you want to keep adding like dimensions, like for example, in this example, you can just keep adding things, right? And it will work. In this case, I just duplicate the function just to make it like simple for you to understand, but you could have only one function and keep adding everything here. But if you do that, you need to go in the helpers when you are writing the data in this one, write to sheet, you gotta make sure that this mapping here is working for only one variable and not two. But yeah, you can just play with that and it will work. Or if you want to just keep adding, right? One another after the other, it also works. And that's it. So hope this is helpful for any of you who want to do some reporting and automate things with Google Analytics and Google Sheets. And if you have any questions, feel free to drop them down below in the comments. I will reply to them as soon as I see them. Like and subscribe. It helps me a lot. And thank you.